On today's show, we have our very good friend Henry from Sens Prospects.
It's time for more prospect talk, but this time Henry arranges the prospects in multiple different tiers that makes things interesting.
We'll get into all that and more on today's Locked On Sens.
I'm Jake Sanderson.
I'm Tim Stützle, and you're listening to the Locked On Senators podcast.
You're Locked On Senators, your daily podcast on the Ottawa Senators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome! You are locked on to the Ottawa Senators, the only daily podcast covering the Sens. On the outskirts of enemy territory, I'm Ross Levitan, alongside Brandon Piller up in the Blue Mountains. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. You can find us on social media. We're at Sens Central on Twitter, LockedOn.Senators on Instagram. The show is free and available everywhere you get podcasts, including on YouTube, where we say hello and let you know that a like, comment, and subscription go a long way to helping the show grow. Shout out to the everydayers out there, the citizens who ride with us Monday through Friday. We've got a great week coming up, and it starts today is Monday, July 22nd, and Pilsy. No excuses for the Senators this year. The numbers have been crunched, and the Senators will travel the second fewest miles among any team this season.
Yeah, you'll love to see that for the Sens, Ross, for a team that it feels like the schedule makers just love to hate and make things difficult on, for a team that always gets sent to Europe and has their games there count as home games, even though we know that's not their home. This is a nice, pleasant surprise to see that at least the travel is on the Sens side.
They might not have a first-round pick in one of the next two drafts, but my goodness, at least they won't travel too much. It's interesting, though, with Montreal being 13th most in the top half of the league when the two are geographically so side by side. So only the Pittsburgh Penguins will travel less than the Ottawa Senators this upcoming season. Of course, the Senators do have that 9-game road trip when the CTC is busy for the World Juniors, but that is split up with the holiday break. The total distance will be 32,800 miles. The Dallas Stars are at 56,700. Florida's got the second most miles to travel this year, but that is an enormous difference. That's 70% the total. That's good for Ottawa. Travel less, play hard at home. Let's get some wins. Let's have those meaningful games when you have 8 of the last 9 games at home. That said, today is all about prospects, Pilsy, and Sens Prospects is one of the best. So without further ado, here's our over half-hour chat with Sens Prospects, taking us through the rest of today's show. Just a quick tease, tomorrow we will have our good friend Mad Sogard back on the show. All right, we now welcome the very first guest in show history back to Locked On Senators. You can find him all over social media at Sens Prospects. Mr. Henry Brown, how are you doing today, sir?
Doing great, guys. So good to be back. What a badge of honor. I really, it's great to be here. Can't believe it's been that long.
I was going to say it's the first time I've introduced you by your government name, but that's not true. We actually spun the people for a loop last time you came on. We did a full Sens Central Citizen segment, and then you peeled the mask off and unveiled that you are the man, myth, legend. And we love how you follow not only the top prospects, but everyone in the organization. It's, long overdue to be following him. But Henry, what's new with you, man? How have you been enjoying the summer?
Man, life's good, guys. Off work for a couple weeks here, so just enjoying the sun. Maybe a little bit too much lately, but it's great. And there's still so much hockey stuff to talk about, and maybe sometimes I want to nerd out a bit more about some of those lesser known names. But I think we've got sort of a good lineup on the docket for today. So excited to dig into it.
Hey, we'll give you that chance to nerd out on those other names. This is what it's all about. Now, we love putting out our top 10 prospect list. We love people getting mad at our list. So, Henry, I'll start off with this. How mad were you at our top 10 prospect list?
So, at a glance, I was like, this is pretty, I get it. I thought it was pretty good. I thought it was really important, the context that you guys added a day or two later. I think it was you, Pilsy, on the show after, which is it's not about their long-term potential. It's more about where they are right now. I think you guys took some, it was justified pushback around the way that the goalies are ranked, but I thought you handled it well. And then Bourgeau, where does he fit on the list, if yes or if not? So overall, that's like the beauty in lists, right? I think it was a pretty solid list, right? So
okay, so
talk
not
about
mad.
Yeah, not mad. He sounds understanding. Would be,
Yes,
I think,
like
the
that.
appropriate emotion to put on you there. Who's your favorite lesser prospect right now?
favorite lesser prospect? I mean, think about guys that like, yeah, we could get into this later, maybe like who's going to have breakout potentials, right?
Ooh.
But
I feel like that's such a backhanded compliment. Who's of the lesser compliments? Who's your
Yeah,
favorite?
it's Hoyt Stanley, right shot
Oh,
D.
nice.
Yeah, he got lots of love at Dev Camp this year. Sean Donovan was shouting him out. In addition to like just what I saw following him at Cornell this season, right? It's a guy who had concussion issues, which is always like a concern. He missed almost a full year, but I think that affected his draft stock, and that might be another fourth round steal for the Sens when we're looking back on this in a few years.
Yeah, I mean, the Sens seem to have luck in the fourth round. When we were at the draft, all three players that they picked in the fourth round at this draft, Ross and I were pleasantly surprised at the value that they got there. So hopefully Hoyt Stanley, who was the first pick of that draft in the fourth round, does the same here.
So for a guy, a defenseman in college, and when you've been following a number of the Senators defensemen that take that route over the course of the last decade, is it usually like the second year that really starts to kind of catch your eye when it's a later round pick, or is it just kind of different case by case? Because Theo Wahlberg went in and in his freshman year kind of impressed, just like Hoyt Stanley. So I don't know if that's just the kids in the later rounds that are getting better and better and making the transition more seamless, or if Ottawa's just made good selections with those two guys. I mean, maybe it's a coincidence, but how do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, it varies so much too, like program to program, sort of at what state of a curve is like a school in when they're bringing in these guys. Like, are they loaded up with older guys trying to go on a run? So there's maybe not enough room for these incoming freshmen. We thought that was the case when like Johnny Tyconic joined UND, but turned out they actually probably were onto something a little ahead of time when he was battling for playing time from day one. But I love that you brought up Theo Wahlberg too, right? That's a guy that was not, I mean, he's not going to get a lot of attention ever playing at Ohio State, even with playing with Stephen Halliday there this season. But his curve has been like extremely impressive, right? I think a lot of fans don't know he's 6'5", 6'6". He's a big guy and 21 points last season. Ross, I'll put you on the spot. So Wahlberg had 21 points at Ohio State. How many of those did Stephen Halliday also factor in on?
Okay, well, Halliday had 36 points in 38 games. So out of 21 points, I'll cut it in half. I'll say 11.
You got 10. So I'm gonna give that to you, right? So it's
well, if I
like,
cut it in half, I was just being a good guy and rounding up.
yeah.
But half is 10.5. So yeah, I'll take it.
So the thing I'm interested there with him is like, how is he going to be able to produce next season without Halliday there, right? Which is sort of what we thought when Halliday was a freshman at OSU and he's playing with like Mason Lohrei and Cole McWard, these guys that graduated to the NHL the next season, basically. He was able to keep it going. So Wahlberg's another guy I'm going to be watching pretty closely this year.
Man, Halliday led that Ohio State team by 10 points all alone. And then it was a two-way tie with 26 points. Scooter Brickley, all-time handle there. But when we talk about the college route, which it seems like we are with Wahlberg and Stanley, these kind of lesser-known prospects that could make a jump next year, even further up the list. Both those guys weren't in our top 10. Frankly, they had decent cases to be in that 9-10 range. But is there another incoming freshman or a guy who's in the college ranks who you think could have another step forward / breakout year?
I'm excited for Luke Alinas, OHL player. Love that pick. I don't know if people talking a lot too. Like he had 5 fights last year as a rookie in the OHL, right? Playing on a pretty stacked kit. Call them fights. I mean, I watched them all. Some are more just like beer league tussles, but a couple of legit scraps. So he's got that edge to his game, and like he was playing lower in the lineup because the team was pretty stacked. So I think a couple people have identified him as like a potential breakout player this season, and I think there's just like a natural gravitation among Sens fans where it's like if a prospect is doing well in the Ontario Hockey League, it just kind of you're more exposed to it. You might get a little bit more hyped up about it than if they were playing out in Red Deer or Moose Jaw or down in a college school. So yeah.
Well, we're going to be the biggest Calgary Hitmen super fans this year, though. We know that with hopefully Yakimchuk getting the C out there out west. But I agree with you. And it's kind of interesting, too, just on that note, with Ellenis and going with the Kitchener Rangers. I'll take this question, Pilsy, so you don't have to give any stick taps to the Rangers. I know you don't like them too much over there in Guelph. But no, jokes aside, like, what do you think of the Sens strategy going back to North Dakota as well over the years? But now it seems like a pipeline's kind of been forged through Kitchener with Matthew Andonovski, Tomas Hamara for a little while, trading for Donovan Sabrango just a year or two after he was there, and now drafting out of the same program. What's your take on choosing one or two area or schools or teams to focus in on your drafting?
For sure. I think there are a couple Kitchener Rangers invited to Dev Camp last year too, guys who played in the rookie tournament. The names escaping me right now, but I think a couple of them are solid. I like that. It's like you're able to go deeper within that like development organization. I think to get a lot more, let's say, like behind the scenes insights about these players, more than just like what you're seeing if you're watching a game, or maybe if you're trying to spread yourselves too thin, right? So pros and cons, but that's sort of my take on spinning it as a positive. It makes my life and our lives easier in terms of like tracking these prospects as they develop, if you're like used to dealing with certain organizations. And it's interesting to see now too, right? There are a number of sort of like common threads between the guys that come through the system. There is like an interesting link to the Tri-City Storm and the USHL and things like that. So yeah, I'm a fan of it.
Yeah, and look, as much as I dislike the Kitchener Rangers because I'm a Guelph Storm guy, that is one of the top tier OHL programs. Like, they do a really good job there. So if you're gonna invest in prospects, that's a good spot to do it. But Henry, are you surprised that I'm looking at the prospect list and the tiers you sent over to us, and I'm scanning through it? Are the only OHL prospects that the Sens have Andonovski and
Ellenis?
I always blank on his name.
Yeah.
That's it, right?
Yeah, the Sens didn't do us any favors this year, by the way. They draft, what is it, Eliasson, Ellenis, Wallenius? Like
that's why I always mix all those
man.
guys up together. Yes.
Yeah, we have a lot of guys graduating. Jorian Donovan, Jabril Toure, and Thomas Samara were all in the O this season. I think they're all not going to be back next year. So yeah, it's just those two guys, one team. We know that they have a nice media department, so we're going to get some like high quality highlights and in-depth behind the scenes stuff, right? So I think it's a good place for them to be.
Well, that's and awesome. I want to follow up on that quickly, Ross, because everyone, ourselves included, kind of looked at new ownership with Andlauer, Steos, OHL guys, obviously the Bulldog connection. And I think a lot of people started making those connections to OHL players, being like, nobody knows the OHL better than Andlauer and Steos. All the Bulldog players, like Vanacker was heavily tied to the Sens. They know this guy, all these kinds of things. And then they didn't really dip that heavily into the OHL. Did that surprise you?
Yes and no. I mean, there definitely seems to have been a heavy lean to the USHL as like a development pool or development route with this club over the past, I think, 3 drafts. It's 10 guys who are either picked from the USHL or who are going into the USHL right after being drafted. So it looks like with that, like, you know, the Bulldog OHL connection, there might be more activity on the guys who have already turned pro, right? Like we saw in the Sokolov deal, maybe a couple of other things that are coming. I'm interested too, like with the 2 guys they brought over from the Oilers in the Yarvenchi trade too, right? Like, are those guys that are, you know, Steos is bringing in because of what he saw when he was in the Oilers organization too, right? So, yeah.
On the other side, we'll get into a Pilsy tease. There's an organizational depth chart, and we can rank them 1 through 10. Sure, we did last week, but the way Henry's got this broken down, I think, is very interesting. We'll talk about some breakout potential candidates, pivotal seasons for certain players on the organizational bubble, and who's ready to make the jump to the National Hockey League. Those conversations are next. You're listening to Locked On Senators, your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Game Time makes getting MLB tickets even faster and easier. Ross, I was just in Chicago. I got to check Wrigley Field off my list, And I'm glad our friends over at Game Time helped me out with that. They got killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from their seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. And Ross, I was especially happy that I chose Game Time. We always talk about it, the views from your seat. I was sitting in third base territory. It was beautiful. But my fiance and I were looking at someone who had a seat who clearly did not use Game Time to pick that seat right in front of this poor guy. Massive post. Like, it was laughable. He would have had to be going like this the entire game just to watch it. And we were sitting there being like, thank goodness we use Game Time to make sure we weren't in that situation. And you can too. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets for not just sports, but comedy, theater, music, whatever you like. You can find it on Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed.
Today's episode is also brought to you by the GLEBE Central Pub, your Olympic headquarters, the GLEBE Central Pub at 779 Bank Street. You can catch all the Olympic events there starting next weekend. Canada's men's basketball team is taking on Giannis Antetokounmpo next Saturday. You know you can always catch the Atletico Ottawa games there. The Arsenal Footy Bar is outstanding. The vibes they create in this atmosphere, it's something you have to go check out yourself. The GLEBE Central Pub. So find them at 779 Bank Street. Go let Blair know that Locked On Senators sent you. It's great people, awesome food, and they've got the specials to match every night of the week. It's something different. You can always go check them out online, GLEBECentralPub.com, and their Instagram is a great spot to see all the latest updates, like their live music schedule every Saturday in July. Allaire and Dunn was just there on Saturday. Next weekend, it's the Joey Vinegar Trio, 9 to midnight. The vibes are free at the GCP. So go check them out, 779 Bank Street, right in the heart of the Glebe, and visit them now, tomorrow, and at your next trip to Lansdowne. Always good vibes at the GCP. All right, welcome back. We've got a 3-segment chat coming with at Sens Prospects. You're already following him on social media and on YouTube. I was clicking through your YouTube the other day, Henry, and some of the old school videos, Pillsy, plug your ears, like Rudolph Balser's first NHL game. Dude, you used to cut the funniest clips on there.
I love it. That is, it's an interesting archive for sure. I think one of the most random things I have on there is the time that the Belleville Sens preseason roster played against the Ottawa U GGs at the Ottawa U rink with, I don't even know if there are fans there. And it's just like, this is a bizarre, niche corner of Sens prospect history. But I love doing those like first NHL game clips. And, I would hear from like family members, especially the overseas guys being like, thank you. I wasn't able to stay up and watch it and things like that. I love the first NHL goals too. And I try and get the first NHL goal call from the Sens and the opposition broadcast. Cause we're spoiled with our broadcast teams. There's so many times where this guy scores and you can tell the other broadcasters are like, I don't know who this guy is. I like what's happening right now. How do I say his name? So nice plug to go check out some good memories.
Your first ever video was Drake Batherson Dev Camp highlights, and he's rocking number 66.
Whoa.
Who do you think has that 66 Batherson jersey now?
You. Oh, no, Kevin Lee.
Kevin Lee.
I'm pretty sure he does.
Of course he does. That's awesome. Your most popular video ever is Brady Tkachuk annoying people, funny clips, and fights. 1.3 million views.
Whoa.
That's the YouTube algorithm for you guys. Like, it was like, I would have put more effort into that video if I would have known what it turned into, but that's a good one to look back on too. Even to just be like Brady Tkachuk played with, it's from his rookie season, right? So it's like just seeing these different guys in frame with him. You're like, that happened. So yeah, good.
That's
good
awesome.
times.
I'd love to have a video with Brady Tkachuk maybe one day here on Locked On Senators.
Hopefully.
But let's get back to the prospect list. themselves. And I think breakout potential would be a natural follow to the conversation in segment 1. Give us more than just Luke Elleness, who I'm excited to watch as well. We know Mitch Brown, who does great work for Elite Prospects. He had him pegged as a breakout candidate as well. So that's 2 guys in his corner thinking that it's going to be a big year from him. Matthew Andonovsky's an interesting one too, after leading the OHL. I know he's on your list, or in plus minus, just finish that thought, on this list. Theo Wahlberg, Hoyt Stanley we talked about. Who are the other 2 players on your breakout potential list?
Let's head on down the 401 to Belleville and look at Oscar Pettersson and Jorian Donovan, right? Guys that we're familiar with them, but this is going to be a whole new look for them as full-time pros in Belleville this season.
Now, we talked to Oscar Pettersson and Coach Dave Bell recently, and Coach was telling us that he was really impressed with Pettersson's ability to kind of self-evaluate himself and be patient. Where do you think he fits into next year's Belleville team? Because they've done a good job adding a lot of really skilled players. So you start trying to piece together guys' roles and what they're going to be asked to do on teams. And where do you think Oscar Pettersson fits into the mix?
It was so interesting to hear his reflection on his time in Belleville, the importance of having like a Jacob Larson. I think he probably slots in as like third line player who also spends time on the second power play. I think that makes sense. This year is really about like kind of what he talked about. It's acclimatizing to that longer schedule, getting used to sleeping on the bus and things like that, while also like being mindful of his sleep and workout patterns too. So I expect him to be more prominently featured on the score sheet too.
Yeah, it was kind of an interesting path for him in Sweden, right? He was such an elite goal scorer at the junior level, but then wasn't really either given those opportunities or able to produce offense like many players that age. But how do you kind of balance the 2 as he makes his jump to North America? You just make sure that you're coaching him and being like, this is what you need to do to be the player at the NHL level. Like, yeah, you had great success offensively, but let's kind of work more about what you do well at the pro level.
I think so. It was a tough spot too, right, in the SHL when they weren't a very good team, right? So they were sort of fighting for their lives and weren't inclined to like, develop players because otherwise they're getting knocked down a league. I think back to some of the things that like Igor talked to you guys about with the importance of someone like Ben Sexton when he was in Belleville and like assisting these guys as they are becoming pro, kind of having almost like, you think of like that friend assistant coach type vibe, someone who's like understanding and you can kind of be vulnerable with and go to. Pettersson's a guy that almost like you wish he would have been able to maybe have like a year in the CHL somewhere because he was too good for the Swedish juniors and then had those, playing time concerns in the SHL. But I think it's about, there's got to be that person on the staff in Belleville that's sort of, able to work with him and be understanding and acknowledging like, hey, it's not going to be perfect. You're going to have great games and you're going to have some slumps, and that's just part of it, right?
Yeah, a guy that I'm excited for this season and probably one of the biggest breakout stars of the prospect pool in the Senators prospect pool is Jorian Donovan. I mean, he gets traded to Saginaw. That goes really well, wins a Mem Cup. And from everything we've heard from people that were at Dev Camp, he was the talk of the town. He was the guy where everyone's like, wait, who's that? That's Donovan? Donovan. Everyone was really talking him up. How do you feel like his game has progressed? And do you think he's going to be able to have a good transition from CHL hockey to the AHL?
Yeah, the thing that I've always liked about Donovan since the Sens picked him, and something that has sort of carried him through over the past couple seasons, enabled him to play, over 80 games across all the schedule this season.
88 games. It's crazy.
It's wild. But he's like, foundational element is he's an excellent skater. And I have all day for guys who excel at that part of the game. I think that's really going to facilitate his transition to the American League. My concern with him, or not concern, but thing to be mindful of, would be, big change in terms of like physical level of like, strength of competition and the physical toll that's going to be taken on him. Whereas, as like an older player in the OHL, he's able to sort of, bully guys around. Now, I think he's going to be seen as, he's going to have to bulk up, right? So I really hope that doesn't mean like an injury would be coming this way, but definitely something I'm mindful of. I wouldn't say worried, but yeah, got to be mindful of it.
He's probably my top defenseman to watch in Belleville this year, just to see how he's able to either establish himself or go through the ebbs and flows of what's no doubt going to be the hardest transition he's had to do in his pro career or in his playing career, even though he got a little sniff at the end of, was it this past? It was last season.
Yeah.
So he was a fresh 18, 19-year-old at that point. So obviously he's bigger, stronger. Those are two attributes that the final player in your breakout candidate he's going to get. But you already look at the size 6'3", 210. Carter Yakimchuk has that in spades. He looks like an offensive magician when he's dangling. How many backhand goals did he score last year? Watching his tape is really impressive to see how he manipulates defenders and how he attacks them in the offensive zone. The question, how's this going to translate not only next year where he's expected to be the guy again in Calgary, but then can he do that at the next level, you think, as a pro?
I think he can. You have to think he can. That's the high upside pick that, this is sort of the home run swing that this group has taken on this player. One of the things that I'm most mindful of, I think, or I'm going to be watching more closely is like, he did this all on like it was a terrible team last year in Calgary, right? And so I think of other players, defense. So Jacob Chychrun comes to mind. I'm not comparing the two, but Chychrun was an offensive star on a very bad Coyotes team because it was like, we're bad. He can be kind of like run and gun freewheeling, right? So my concern is like, if the Hitmen are to take a next step, how does that affect his offensive game? I think we sort of saw that in the behind the scenes video that the Sens put out, which if folks haven't watched it, about the Sens making the Yakimchuk pick, super interesting, right? But they were asking him, was it sort of like, were the coaches allowing him to just sort of go about this, or was there more structure? So it's sort of like, if the team gets better, does that, decrease his offensive output, or do they move him to a better team? And then how does that affect him too, right? So,
because he's the oldest player in the draft, give or take, and because of it, he's going into his fourth, and what he said in that video you referenced, his final season in the WHL. Now, I just went back yesterday because I needed to refresh myself. It's so much going on right after the draft. I was like, I want to sit down and really dive into his game. And there's obviously that great video that Elite Prospects put out called He Dangles Everyone that does talk about a bit of the fact that he's almost aggressive to a fault. But do you think that in the defensive zone too could be a product of playing on a bad team and feeling like, hey, if I don't get him, nobody else is?
Absolutely. It's also a very coachable thing, right? I think that's something that you can learn and improve on, right? So not something I'm like, we'll watch for it, but long term, not too worried about it.
Yeah. I think he's going to make Team Canada. You?
I do too. Yeah. There's
World Juniors.
Yeah. There's like an interesting like history of Sens prospects actually playing for Team Canada, even as long shots too. I think back to like the year that Drake Batherson made it, where I don't even think he was invited to the summer camp, but I'm expecting to see Yakimchuk there too, and being able to go see him in person because the tournament's going to be here in Ottawa, so that'd be great.
He's going to be a fun prospect to watch no matter what, though. Like his highlight reel, I keep going back to it, but it is hilariously nasty.
Yeah, I love that you dug up his favorite player was Jordan Eberle growing up, right?
Yeah. Who do you model your game after, eh? Jordan Eberle. Aren't you a defenseman? Yeah, but he had hands. No, I love that, man. And it's going to be fun to watch Yakimchuk develop, but again, not a make or break year for him, although you could probably argue Sens fans might get a little antsy if things don't go his way. Just feels like probably what's best is a trade at the deadline to a contending team for like a 16-wheeler worth of draft picks for the next 3 decades coming back to Calgary. But who's it a make or break season for in the Senators prospect pool? That conversation is next. You're listening to Locked On Senators, your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, that's what brings home the winning trophy, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, they got it, and so much more. So whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's guaranteed fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you get your money back. It's that simple, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not burning cash. With all the parts you need, but at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that W. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay guarantee fit only available to U.S. customers. Check it out today, guys. eBay Motors.
Also want to just give a quick shout out to our friends at Farm to Fork. Congratulations on the soft opening of their actual storefront. It's on Carling Avenue, 1570, right between the Diamond Storage and the Corral building. So shout out to our friends at Farm to Fork, farmtoforkdelivery.ca. Taste the Farm to Fork difference. You will never go back to grocery store meats. All right, welcome back. Henry is learning the behind the scenes. I can tell from his face. He's like, wait, there's no music playing. Why are your heads bobbing? A little magic in post-editing.
Ross, you're giving away the secret.
I know. Henry's going to be like, wow, it looks like I wasn't having fun. Hey, there's going to be great music playing in the background, and you're just going to be deadpan.
He gave us a good thumbs up. He's vibing.
Yeah.
Okay.
I got
Very
you, Henry.
nice. What prospects in this next pool get a thumbs up for you? Because we're in the phase with a number of players, 9 of them on your list, where this is a pivotal year. Does pivotal mean make or break, or just where they stand in the hierarchy of Sens prospects?
I think a lot of this, almost every guy on this list, this is a make or break season. Whether or not it literally is sort of their final year with the organization, that's not necessarily the case. But this coming season is sort of, they're at the point in their development curve where this is going to, I think, determine their ultimate fate and future within the org.
Are we unrationally still holding on to Tyler Boucher hopes? That was probably the part of our top 10 list, Ross, that people got most mad at. Now, obviously, we're never biased on this show, but it does help that he's been on the show a bunch. We're rooting for him. He's a good kid, good family, and he's still so young. There's still so much development progress to go, but we fully understand you can't develop if you're not on the ice playing. Where are you at with Tyler Boucher, Henry?
I think he's in the wind for me. I feel like I learned my lesson with Logan Brown, held on to a guy for too long because he was a first round pick. They're totally different players, but sort of I think an undercurrent that was similar with both of them is they both had a lot of injury issues as like young teenagers, and that's unfortunately carried through into their pro careers. So I love the pedigree. I like all the positive attributes that Tyler has. I still think makes him really intriguing, but unfortunately, like he hasn't done anything to, I think, earn a spot in that top 10 list yet. So I understand why he's on your list, but for me, yeah, I have no expectations for him at this point.
If we wanted to really create a shockwave or be a click artist, that sort of thing, we would have kept him in the top 3, top 4 on our prospect list. But honestly, like if he could stay healthy, last year, I know you were at Dev Camp last year as well. Like he was the best player on the ice, him and Halliday.
Yeah, it was wild.
His shot pops.
The tools are there. He's got the big frame. Like people hate playing against him, right? And he was like too aggressive for the NCAA, too aggressive for the OHL.
Didn't he shatter the glass at the OHL?
Yeah, he shattered a few things, I think, in the OHL.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, we're rooting for Tyler to get that on track because, again, the tools are there. But another guy where we were sold as him out of that 2021 draft, we're like, yeah, we went for size, we went for physicality, but you guys should check out this Oliver Johansson kid. He's got great hands. He's over in Sweden. Will he ever get a contract, ever come over, do you think? Or is that ship sailed?
It's interesting to me that he got invited back to Dev Camp this year, right? So I think there's still like a little bit of something there. And he's another case where like Victor Lodin, another blast from the past. Johansson was like, the similarities between those two players is like they were among the best players in Sweden in the like 12 to 14 age range, right? So going like way back in history. So he's got this like pedigree that I think is one of the reasons why he was picked. But he had a super disappointing season last year, right? In the SHL, I want to say he had less than 10 points in over 50 games. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but this is a season where Ottawa is going to be able to, they have to make the decision. I think his contract date it's June 1st, 2025. So he's a long shot, but again, it's sort of nice to have that flexibility to see, does anything change this year? If so, great. Maybe he does earn that contract, can come over to Belleville at the end of the year, that sort of thing. That's like the best case with this player.
Tomorrow on Locked On Senators, we'll talk to one of our favorite guys, a lot of insight into his own game, and that's Mads Søgaard, who you have here. He's 23 years old. He got that 2-year contract where the second year is a one-way deal. Got to be the thought process that, hey, if we can re-sign Linus Ullmark, we got an Ullmark-Søgaard pair in 2025, 2026. What does he have to do for you to prove that he can handle that level of responsibility?
That's it. You're right. It's that contract is the reason why this is the big season for him. And we have goalies in the recent past, who were given the same deal, the Gustafsons or Decords, and the previous regime anyway was like not interested in.
Didn't Hogberg get the same kind of deal as well?
Sounds familiar.
And Joey Decord got it for sure.
Yeah. So this season, it's got to be about staying healthy and really like establishing himself as like a top tier goalie in the American Hockey League. I want people to talk about Søgaard, in the same breath as like Askarov over in Milwaukee, right? I understand they're not on the same plane right now, but you just got to play a ton, stay healthy, be reliable, be consistent too, right? Even last year, I think there was just a lot of, he would have these, shutouts or like allowing one goal, but then he'd sort of get torn apart for, 3, 4, 5, 6 goal games against, right? So just about staying healthy, consistency, owning the crease as a starter. Hopefully doesn't, there's no injuries in Ottawa, which sort of like derail that development, that make bringing him in as the backup next year no brainer. That's what I'd love to see.
Okay, now I'm going to do a little who are you higher on, and maybe give us a quick synopsis on, and just to jump off the goalie conversation, Levi Merilainen and Mads Søgaard. How do you compare, contrast the two?
Just quickly, this was the second part of our list that people got very mad at, so I'm interested to hear your opinion, Henry.
You handled this perfectly though, Pilsy. Like, it's all about the context of why you rank them differently, right? Yes. Long term, I'm team Merilainen. I think he is the future for this organization. He's just got an unbelievable ceiling, whereas I think Søgaard is, solid goaltender, but I think the size might be a little bit of he anchors on it a little bit too much, which creates sort of some habits or ways of playing that you can get away with in the American League, or has gotten away with thus far in his career. But I think it caps his ceiling as an NHL goaltender, whereas Merilainen sort of got that complete package. He's sneaky big too, right? He's obviously not the same size, but he's not a small guy too. So that's the horse that I'm betting on between these two.
Now, were you satisfied in the way the new regime handled the crease in Belleville? Because we were kind of looking at this, Ross and I, and we're like, what are they going to do if they bring back Mando? Like Mando and Levy, both those guys are kind of past playing in the ECHL, just to dump them there, just to get them some time playing. And you got to give Mads Søgaard his space. Were you happy that they were able to create an environment where it's just Søgaard and Levy? Obviously sad to see Mando go. Good guy, good player. We're hoping the best for him. But
you got paid too, eh? $150K guaranteed. Hell yeah.
Yeah, that's nice for him. But are you kind of the mind where, all right, this is set, this is how I like it? Or maybe do you think they need to bring in a veteran guy that can just be there just in case injuries happen, so that, like you said, injuries in Ottawa don't derail Mad's season, him having to go up? You can just toss kind of a veteran guy up there instead?
Otherwise, they'll have to go. Henry, remember, was it 2 years ago where Belleville had basically, if you brought your gear to the game in your car, you could be the backup goalie on any given night.
Seriously.
Honestly, it was like the backup goalie at Queen's University was just driving down the highway to go, I think they had a guy from Queen's played a game or two. I remember like the equipment and stuff too, the Gales colors. So I think a number of the moves that Staios and company have made have been about sort of righting the ship, just in terms of, even you look at the big club now, we have in the top 4, 2 left, 2 right D. In the American League, it's not like 8 guys trying to fight for the top 6, right? It's pretty clear that they're bringing in players who are meant to be middle, lower 6 players in the American League, right? So it's balance, I guess, is the word that I'm looking for. So yes, I really like that they cleared out the crease here in Belleville. The B-Sens also signed Michael Simpson, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
12 goalies dressed for a game 2 years ago.
Those are some names that Yeah, that is
Well,
wild.
speaking of names, to get you back on track, this Michael Simpson guy was like the best goalie in the CHL last year, no? With the London Knights.
I love that's like a great American League gamble. Why not, right? So
Yeah, I like that one a lot. So there's the goaltending conversation. Pillsy, where do we want to go next on the this or that? Brand new segment, LSP.
Should we head over to the smallest tier we haven't touched on yet, the top tier, if you
Well,
will?
if you don't want to throw it out, I want to know who he likes better on these two guys, because I deliberated when we were making our top 10, the two centermen who are going to be in Belleville next year, Zach Ostapchuk, Stephen Halliday.
Halliday has the higher ceiling in terms of like what he could be, right? It's the fact that he's got that like point production. I mean, what a disher, right? Yeah, that's no slight to Ostapchuk though, right? I think I'd say he has the inside track on being like a long-term pro. I'd say I could see him having sort of like a longer career in a different role, right? It's in that like middle six is sort of his ceiling, right? So, I love that Halliday is like a big-bodied skill player who has, at least thus far, knock on wood, really no history of injuries too, which is I love to see. But excited to have both these guys in the org, and like they both bring different skill sets, right? So it speaks to balance, right? We'll be watching how they perform at the faceoff circle, I guess, this year in Belleville. Literally, like how good are they at winning faceoffs, right? But yeah, I'm a fan of both of these players. I liked how you had them ranked too.
Now, do you think there's a realistic chance for Halliday to see NHL time this year? Because I'm kind of torn on this. Part of me thinks, yeah, he could definitely be a fourth line guy in Ottawa. But then also part of me is like, I know he popped off last year in the AHL, but give him a year to get seasoned in the AHL a little bit more rather than rush him. Whereas Ostapchuk, he's had that full year. He had a bit of time in the NHL. So maybe just in ranking and kind of seniority, that's the word I'm looking for, seniority-wise, you would go to Ostapchuk instead. Like, where are you on those two battling for a fourth-line center job in Ottawa?
I expect Halliday to play in the NHL this season. I was surprised that he wasn't offered sort of the option to get a couple games at the end of last year. There might have been like a contract limit thing. That's why he signed the like AHL only deal at the end of the year.
Well, and not only that, but he, because of his age and being a double overager in the draft, he could only sign a 2-year entry level. So if they had burned a year, then all of a sudden he'd be going into a contract year right now. Maybe that's it.
The thing, we were talking about this earlier too. He's going to have to adjust to the volume of games in the American League this year. Very different than what he saw in the last 2 years in the NCAA. But prior to that, he spent lots of time in the USHL, which is a 60-ish, 60, 70 game season, right? He went on some playoff runs too there. So, I would give Halliday the edge out of camp right now, I think. Over Ostapchuk. But I'd expect to see both up with Ottawa this season, just in different roles, right?
I love it. I mean, we've been huge fans of his growth and just the way that he handles himself on the ice. I think I was a little bit surprised, might not be the right word, but impressed. Like, he's getting involved physically a lot more than I think I knew he did in college.
Yeah, it surprised me too. It like doesn't really jive with the personality you pick up on, like when you guys are talking to him, right? He seems very reserved, soft-spoken, and great to see though. It's kind of similar to Tyler Clevin in a lot of ways too, where they have these like physical gifts, but they're just like pretty chill, quiet guys. So we can talk about Clevin in a bit, but yeah.
Well, let's talk about Clevin now, staying in that bubble, because I don't know if you've already shown it on the screen or not, Ross, but in Henry's NHL bubble, prime for NHL debuts or increased roles, it's Tyler Clevin, Ostapchuk, and Halliday. Where would you, Ross and I were kind of toying around with this, where would you set the over-under for Tyler Clevin games played in Ottawa this season? Because I think, Ross, correct me if I'm wrong, but we put it at like, 60, 65, somewhere there?
I think you asked me over under 50, and I hammered the over.
Okay, so let's bump that to 60.
Sure.
Is that a good line? 60?
I would. This is a clip. I would take the under on that. I'm taking the under on it. See if we can get a prop on that. I'm also like, I preach patience. I think lately there has been like a discourse change around like guys. It's okay for guys to spend longer in the American League, is my belief too. Historically, that was definitely the case. Things are changing, right? But at the same time, I'm going to argue both sides here. is who, if not Clevin, then who? There is no, even you're looking at like the potential free agent crop. I would rather it be him, I think. But I still think, right, that's just it was his first time playing that full schedule. It wouldn't be bad for him to spend more time in the AHL, but I agree. It sounds like everything we're hearing, he's going to spend a lot of time in Ottawa next year.
I like that. A little bit of it. So if that's the differing opinion, who do you think plays those minutes in Ottawa?
Somebody who's not on the org right now. That's
okay. Outside.
Yeah.
I don't mind that. Do you have a name in mind? Somebody that you'd prefer to go out and get?
I'm not saying I'd prefer it. Maybe I would. Yeah. Shattenkirk, maybe. We'll see.
Sure. Yeah,
Yep.
we will see.
We'll see.
Final question for me, and Henry, we always appreciate you doing this. Everyone's already following you on social media at Sens Prospects. We love the work that you do, and just a great guy to boot. So we appreciate all your insight on our show. From the first guest ever, when you called, you're like, hey, guys, 2019 World Juniors, watch this Shane Pinto kid. He was just a second-round pick for Ottawa. He's got great hands in front of the net. Boom, goes out, first goal of the tournament, Pinto tip in front, and that's where he won Best Forward on Team USA that tournament, and the rest has kind of been history from there. So you put us onto that quick, and man, it's been 5 years since, if you can believe it or not, but we got to get your take on the Sens offseason. What was the biggest, most impactful move, and why was it Linus Ullmark?
It was Ullmark, right? I can't stand here in good conscience and argue that any of the other moves are.
Yeah.
A high-level thing I love, yes, maybe you could say a lot of lateral moves or like got players that we were attached to were shipped out, and it's sort of sad to see Matthew Joseph. But the high level, we're not just running back with the same thing, right? You had to change something. It wasn't working. The team wasn't getting it done. So it's a new crop of players. There's going to be a new voice in the room. I think that is, you either had a choice of, are you going to change? Are you going to move from the core? But you're not. The decision is not. We're keeping Brady, Batherson, Norris, Sanderson, Chabot. We're keeping that group together. So what you have to do, if you're not just going to come back with the same group, is you got to make some moves within that sort of, exterior second or third tier. So I'm Team Steos. I'm supporting the moves right now. But let's talk again maybe at the end of November. I think we'll have a great sense of how has all these moves played out.
Well, we're actually going to talk to you later this summer. I'll explain with what after Pillsy's got a final question.
Yeah, well, final question for me. I'll just open it up, Henry, because you said you love talking about some of the lesser guys, and you were hoping to get a chance. So, is there a guy that we didn't touch on that you wanted to get in depth on here?
Goalie friendly show. Let's talk about two of them real quick. Kevin Riedler making the jump from the USHL to the NCAA. Yep. Unbelievable rise on this player since being drafted back up at the World Juniors last year for Sweden. One thing I'm not clear of, maybe someone listening can help me out here, is he blocked at Nebraska right now? I know they've had that Slovakian goalie there for a while. So is he going to get a lot of playing time, or is he going to be the guy? I don't actually know. Is one. The other one is what's happening with the enigma of Vladimir Nikitin going back overseas, signing with the KHL team, but actually it's a two-way. So he might spend time in the MHL with their, junior club. Just a bizarre player who was extremely inconsistent. He was amazing. He scored a goal, but then he's getting shelled and getting hurt in the playoffs. So yeah, those are two guys that, we could do a whole other podcast on some of these lesser known names, but goalie friendly show. Those are two names.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Sens Prospect. Stay tuned on our social media. He's going to be answering your questions as well from our YouTube, but that's Henry Brown. You can follow him at Sens Prospects. For Brandon Piller and Henry, I'm Ross Levitan. We'll chat tomorrow with Matt Sogard. This has been another edition of the Locked On Senators podcast. Your team every day.